On the evening of July 22, 2011, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Burnaby, Canada issued a missing person alert. Xiaodong Hu, a 27-year-old Chinese woman, had vanished without a trace after being dropped off at her apartment by her husband on the evening of the 15th. By that point, she had been missing for exactly 7 days. Zhongming Mao, her husband, had reported her missing on the 18th and posted missing person notices everywhere. Although the couple was in the process of divorcing and living separately, he appeared to be putting his full effort into finding his wife. Zhao Li, a police officer handling the case, questioned him as a person of interest. However, this interrogation raised suspicions about the husband's unusual behavior. Regarding his wife's disappearance, Zhongming's statements were full of contradictions. Initially, he claimed he last saw his wife between 8 and 9 p.m. on the 15th. Later, he changed his story, insisting that Xiaodong had left their home in the Gao Guilin area on foot at 5:30 a.m. on the 16th. According to him, they had arranged to meet that afternoon, but Xiaodong never showed up. More suspiciously, she didn't visit her son over the weekend as usual. When police questioned why he discovered his wife wasn't responding on the 16th, but waited until the 18th to report her missing, Zhongming explained that the 16th was Xiaodong's solo day, a day she reserved for herself. He thought she might not want to be disturbed that day, so he waited. Only after confirming she missed her scheduled parenting class did he decide to report the matter to authorities. Later, Zhongming suggested that his wife might have secretly run away with another man. However, what made police most suspicious was their discovery that in the early morning of the 16th, Zhongming had called a taxi by phone to pick up a woman to his home and paid with a credit card. Notably, on the 18th, the same day he reported his wife missing, he quickly canceled this card. When police directly questioned him about concealing this important information, Zhongming hastily explained that he had called for a special service. According to his statement, after finishing business, he told the woman to leave. He justified hiding this information for 2 reasons. First, he felt ashamed of his behavior, and second, he feared the police would put him on their suspect list. However, these excuses were quickly exposed when police found the taxi driver and verified the story, immediately proving Zhongming had lied. Consequently, Zhongming changed his statement again, claiming that the woman was actually Xiaodong. He declared that she had come to the house demanding $5,000 for furniture before leaving. Such hole-filled statements were like carving "I have issues" on his forehead. However, despite growing suspicions, police still had no concrete evidence to prove their doubts. Where was Xiaodong now? Was she alive or dead? What had happened between her and her husband? All remained unanswered questions. Xiaodong's parents, upon receiving news of their daughter's disappearance on July 19th, immediately processed their exit papers and arrived in Vancouver on August 5th. They chose to stay in the Burnaby apartment, the last place their daughter was seen. Her father, with over 10 years of police experience, feared his daughter faced more misfortune than luck. Nevertheless, the elderly couple tirelessly posted missing person notices everywhere for more than 20 days, visiting shopping malls and streets throughout Burnaby with the faint hope of finding their daughter. On August 24th, the couple decided to seek help from the media. During an emotional press conference, they couldn't hold back tears and exclaimed, "If alive, we must see the person. If dead, we must see the body. Whatever accident has befallen our daughter, please help us find the truth." No one expected that just 3 days after the press conference, the worst nightmare would become reality. 2 fishermen accidentally discovered a suspicious suitcase floating on the Fraser River. When they opened it, they were horrified to find a woman's body inside. Terrified, they immediately called the police. At the scene, authorities confirmed it was the body of an Asian woman. The victim had suffered brutal injuries. Her head had at least a dozen wounds from violent blows. Her skull was punctured, facial bones and nasal spine were fractured, and an electrical cord was tightly wrapped around her neck. All signs indicated the victim had been brutally and deliberately murdered. After examination, the medical examiner confirmed this was Xiaodong, who had been missing for over 40 days. However, despite finding the body, police kept the information confidential because of Zhongming's previous contradictory statements, which had made them extremely suspicious. At this point, they deployed an undercover sting operation to catch the criminal. Would they succeed? On September 8th, two undercover investigators using the aliases Simon and Jimmy unexpectedly knocked on Zhongming's door. They cleverly disguised themselves as professional criminals, claiming they had accidentally discovered his wife's body and presented crime scene photos as evidence. The two offered to help dispose of the body more discreetly and thoroughly, but requested a fee in exchange. After some negotiation, Zhongming finally agreed to pay $7,000, with $3,000 up front, and the remainder to be paid after the job was completed. Not stopping there during the conversation, Zhongming inadvertently revealed all his crime tools and even asked the undercover investigators if they found the body at the bottom of the sea. When the investigators remarked that he hadn't handled the situation well, Zhongming arrogantly replied, "That night I was so stupid, too worried, so I acted without thinking." Zhongming smugly thought he was safe and was very satisfied with his plan. He had no idea that the very next day, police would swoop in to arrest him and charge him with first-degree murder. How tragic that a marriage that once had happy days ended with such a horrifying conclusion. Even if they couldn't continue living together, they could have simply gone their separate ways. How much hatred must one harbor to mercilessly push someone who was once their life partner to such a tragic death? To find answers to these questions, we need to learn more about this unusual family. Zhongming was born in 1976, 35 years old when the crime occurred, and could communicate fluently in both Mandarin and English. Born into an intellectual family, his father was a renowned university professor. In 1998, after graduating from a prestigious university in Xiaodong, he migrated with his parents to Vancouver to start a new life. After settling in Canada, Zhongming decided to study computer science at Capilano University. He demonstrated special talent by completing a program in just 10 months that took others 2 years, an achievement he was extremely proud of. After that, Zhongming began his career as a software engineer and was quickly valued by his superiors for his outstanding professional abilities. Compared to her husband, Yating seemed to face more challenges in her educational journey. Born in Wuhan, China, she was only 27 when murdered. In 2001, at just 17, she came alone to Canada to study, a courageous decision at such a young age. A degree in operations management that would normally take 2 years to achieve took Yating 7 years across different schools before she could graduate. Despite living in Canada for many years, her English proficiency remained at an intermediate level, creating numerous barriers in her daily life. After marriage, Yating strived to find work and was eventually hired as a warehouse manager. This was considered a starting position in operations management, with the main responsibility of supervising goods and recording detailed inventory data. However, she only maintained this job for a few months before having to resign. Unfortunately, this was her only work experience since entering married life. Initially, the young couple enjoyed an excellent relationship. Zhongming even enthusiastically told his in-laws that he felt he had found a gold nugget, always treasuring Yating like an irreplaceable jewel. However, like many marriages, the initial happiness didn't last long before disagreements began to appear. In 2006, Zhongming, the family's main breadwinner, unexpectedly lost his job. This shock immediately plunged the couple into financial difficulties. Being arrogant by nature, Zhongming always harbored ambitions of brilliant success before age 40, but never expected to be slapped in the face by harsh reality at just 30. On November 16th, when Yating revealed her husband's unemployment to her parents, Zhongming couldn't control his anger and physically assaulted his wife. Unfortunately, this wasn't an isolated incident. During that period, similar violent situations occurred multiple times, forcing Yating to call the police for protection. On January 19, 2007, as a consequence of domestic violence, Zhongming was court-ordered to comply with a behavioral control order for 1 year and required to attend psychological counseling. It wasn't until 2008, with the birth of their first son, that the tense relationship began to improve, giving the small family a rare period of happiness. In late 2008, the couple moved from his parents' home to a new house in Gaoguilin and Xiaodong accidentally became pregnant with their second child. At this time, she not only had to care for their young firstborn son, but also endure the discomforts of pregnancy. Seeing her husband working hard for the family, she was full of happiness and gratitude. During the last 2 months of her pregnancy, Zhongming hired a housekeeper to share the burden of housework and childcare. However, after just 1 month, he once again found himself unemployed, a situation that lasted 9 months. This financial shock completely shattered their faith in the future. Even the birth of their second son couldn't bring joy to the fracturing family. Conflicts between them worsened, with almost every conversation turning into an argument. They lost the ability to communicate calmly with each other. After their second son was born, Xiaodong's parents traveled all the way to Vancouver and stayed for over a month to care for their daughter. Witnessing how poorly their son-in-law treated their daughter, they couldn't hold back and had a fierce argument with him, ultimately being mercilessly sent back to China. Before leaving, Xiaodong's mother bitterly said to Zhongming, "If you treat my daughter like this while I'm here, how will you bully her when I'm gone?" After returning to China, concerned about their daughter's difficult life, the elderly couple frequently sent money and gifts to help the small family overcome difficult times. Although Zhongming finally found employment in March 2010, helping the family escape financial hardship, hiring help remained an unaffordable luxury. Consequently, the entire burden of childcare and housework fell on Xiaodong's shoulders. To spend time with her children during the day, she had to wait until they were asleep in the evening to begin cleaning the house and preparing 3 meals for the following day. Because of this packed schedule, she often worked until 1 or 2 in the morning before finally getting a brief sleep. Sadly, all these efforts and sacrifices received no support or help from her husband. The lack of companionship and sharing from Zhongming made Xiaodong constantly feel disappointed and blame herself for not being able to take better care of the family and children, though she was trying her best within her capabilities. However, Zhongming completely rejected Xiaodong's approach to childcare. Later, he described his wife as emotionally unstable, frequently hitting the children, and capable of sudden mood changes even when in a good mood. Once, their older son said his mother had grabbed his head and banged it into a diaper bucket, which Zhongming found unacceptable. Therefore, he and Xiaodong frequently argued, and he ultimately hit his wife again. In October 2010, some neighbors accidentally saw Xiaodong with a face full of injuries, but this time she chose silence instead of calling the police. Although Zhongming always expressed clear dissatisfaction with his wife, the opinions of those around them about Xiaodong were completely opposite. In family gatherings and exchanges with acquaintances, everyone observed that they could see how Xiaodong meticulously and devotedly educated her children. She often read many child-rearing materials to learn and summarize experiences. Their older son, though very intelligent, frequently became angry and showed violent tendencies toward others. Xiaodong continuously tried to change this, striving to give her son more encouragement and love. Finally, her efforts were rewarded when her son made significant improvements in his behavior and emotional control. To improve the family atmosphere, Xiaodong tried to show more understanding, care, and support for her husband. Even Zhongming's father later mentioned that during that time, she was completely compliant with her husband, enduring with patience. Zhongming himself was very touched and began helping with housework. On May 12, 2011, just because Xiaodong turned off the TV that Zhongming had turned on for their eldest son to watch, they once again fell into a heated argument. In his anger, Zhongming swung his fist at his wife, but fortunately, Xiaodong managed to dodge it. This time, she had completely exhausted her trust and patience. With no other choice, she immediately called the police, quickly took her 2 sons to a shelter for abused women, and sought a lawyer to initiate divorce proceedings. This event sparked Zhongming's first dark thoughts about killing his wife. However, it wasn't until July 16th, when Xiaodong firmly fought for custody of their 2 sons and refused to compromise, that Zhongming truly became determined to carry out his vicious plan, a decision that pushed the entire family into an irredeemable tragedy. Around 3 a.m. on July 16th, 2011, Zhongming contacted Xiaodong, suggesting she return to their house in the Gaoguilin area to discuss divorce and child custody. He even feigned concern by helping her call a taxi. During negotiations, Zhongming felt his ex-wife was difficult to persuade and unwilling to compromise. Around 5 a.m., when Yating went to the third-floor bathroom, he quietly went down to the garage, found a hard metal bar, then returned to the house, carefully closing all windows to prevent any screams from escaping. When Yating emerged from the bathroom, Zhongming pretended to be friendly, suggesting they go to the laundry room with the excuse, "I have something I want to show you." As soon as his ex-wife turned her back to him, Zhongming cruelly swung the metal bar, striking her head hard. Completely surprised, Yating couldn't resist or scream for help, and Zhongming continued increasing force with many more blows. Seeing Yating collapsed on the floor but still with faint breathing, Zhongming coldly took out a pre-prepared electrical cord, tightening it around the neck of the woman who was once his wife to complete the brutal act. After Yating died, Zhongming coldly placed the body in a pre-prepared suitcase and put it in his car trunk. Then, he meticulously used tissues to clean up the bloody stains. During the disposal process, their two sons woke up twice, but Zhongming gently told them to go back to bed and sleep a while longer, a mask of loving father concealing a horrific crime. Not until around 10 a.m. did he complete cleaning the crime scene, erasing all traces of his crime. At this point, Zhongming began carefully calculating how to thoroughly dispose of the evidence and create an alibi for himself. To prove no murder had occurred in the house, around 11 a.m. that day, he cleverly invited neighbor Zhang Xin and his wife over. Then, using the excuse of needing to buy food, he asked them to watch his two sons. When the neighbors expressed surprise at seeing the house unusually messy, Zhongming quickly explained it was because he was sorting items to rent out the second floor. Afterward, to further cover up his crime, Zhongming impersonated Yating to send himself an email apologizing for previous conflicts. At the same time, he cleverly replied to this email, creating the illusion that Yating was still alive and communicating normally. In the following 2 days, Zhongming's behavior became increasingly chilling. On the 16th, he calmly took his two children to the Vancouver Aquarium to play, then visited his in-laws' house and stayed overnight. On the 17th, he continued taking his children to church, then pretended to go to Yating's rented room to find mom, followed by taking the children to Burnaby Mountain to play, and finally returning to his parents' home to spend the night. The horrifying fact is that throughout this process, Yating's body remained motionless in the car trunk, just an arm's length away from the innocent children. When the body began to emit a foul odor, Zhongming coldly turned on the car's air conditioning to neutralize the smell. That day, he even hired cleaning staff to thoroughly clean the house, aiming to erase any remaining traces of the horrific crime. At 3 a.m. on July 18, 2011, under the silent darkness, Zhongming drove to the deserted Fraser River shoreline in the Richmond area, carrying the blood-soaked suitcase containing his wife's body. He added 2 heavy stones to increase weight, then attempted to swim farther from shore, intending to take the suitcase to mid-river. However, the plan didn't go smoothly when the suitcase quickly absorbed water, weight suddenly increasing, forcing him to give up, helplessly watching the suitcase slowly sink into the dark water. This disposal timing wasn't random. Zhongming had carefully studied tide tables, knowing it was ebb tide, water at its lowest level, making the process easier. After completion, he meticulously threw the metal bar, the murder weapon, into a remote swamp. Next, he buried Yating's phone, keys, wedding ring, and wallet in his parents' yard. However, after reconsideration, he dug up the wallet to retrieve the children's medical cards, a small but important detail. Only after all traces were erased did Zhongming pretend to be worried and report to police that his wife was missing, confident he had committed a perfect, flawless crime. Throughout the entire criminal process, Zhongming clearly displayed deeply calculating, cold-blooded, and terrifyingly heartless traits. Not stopping at murdering his wife, he even impersonated Yating to purchase a $500,000 life insurance policy with himself as the primary beneficiary, a scheme calculated to the extreme. After his arrest, Zhongming coldly stated that after many years together, he had completely lost feelings for his wife, and if not for the children, they would have divorced long ago. More shockingly, he expressed no remorse for killing his wife, only feeling guilty toward his parents and children, innocent people dragged into the tragedy he created. In his testimony, Zhongming cruelly described his wife as not being a good mother. On a scale of 10, he rated Xiaodong at only 4 points, while considering himself a father deserving 7 points. However, even in his arrogance, he had to acknowledge a harsh truth. When he committed this crime, his score became an absolute 0. A few months before the tragedy, Xiaodong had suddenly presented a divorce agreement, requiring Zhongming to sign within 30 days, an action that completely bewildered him. Under professional guidance from social workers at the Women's Protection Center, Xiaodong had made firm demands, requiring 6,000 Canadian dollars monthly for support, and the condition that Zhongming could only see the children when they turned 18. Faced with these demands, Zhongming showed restraint, saying he hoped they could sit down and talk in a civilized manner. In the 2 weeks before the bloody incident, the couple seemed to have made progress in reconciliation, even going on picnics and camping together like a normal family. However, according to Zhongming's testimony, Xiaodong had unpredictably volatile moods, one moment sweetly discussing relationship repairs, the next coldly declaring she wanted to take the children away. He accused her of constantly using child custody to threaten and control him, threatening to ban him from seeing the children at the slightest disagreement, actions Zhongming claimed he could no longer endure. However, it should be noted these justifications were one-sided accusations from Zhongming himself. Ling Muxi, a representative of the church where the family had been active, spoke up to refute, confirming that Xiaodong only requested a modest support amount of $2,300 monthly, much lower than Zhongming's claim. Particularly, the accusation about children needing to be 18 before seeing their father was completely unfounded and illogical. Moreover, such an extreme requirement would never be approved by any judge, as Canadian law clearly states. As long as the father makes reasonable court requests and sets time and place to see children, the mother has no right to prevent this relationship. Ironically, Zhongming always claimed his crime motive was for the children, but the devastating consequence is that now 2 innocent children face a painful reality. Mother dead, father imprisoned, leaving them as true orphans. After his arrest, Zhongming was charged with first-degree murder. His defense lawyer declared he had lost emotional control and killed in the heat of the moment due to failed custody negotiations. On October 9, 2012, under his lawyer's guidance, Zhongming pleaded guilty in court. The judge found him guilty of second-degree murder, sentencing him to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole for 14 years. By then, he had already served 13 months in jail. In other words, after 12 years and 11 months more, he could be eligible for parole. Xiaodong's father expressed his inability to accept this verdict, but was ultimately powerless to change it. Next, we'll explore a case that could be described as more horrific and frightening than even those depicted in movies. Wang Nuanuan was born in 1987 in Nanjing, Jiangsu Province. Her parents were ordinary workers. After graduating from high school in 2005, she was accepted into the tourism management program at Yangzhou University. After graduation, she worked at a travel agency. Within 2 years, she had developed from a new employee to become a key staff member. In 2012, due to business development needs, she was sent by her company to Thailand to expand the market. At that time, Nuanuan was only 25 years old and full of passion. In this foreign country, she demonstrated her abilities, accumulated many relationships and resources, and managed the company's Thai market very well. In 2015, Nuanuan decided to quit her job to start her own business. Although family and friends advised her that a woman shouldn't work so hard, she remained determined to try. For her first venture, she planned to sell dried fruit, processing fresh fruit from Thailand and selling it back to China. But due to lack of experience and poor control of the time from harvest to processing, half of the fruit rotted before it could be processed. This startup attempt cost Nuanuan a loss of over $30,000. Relatives and friends hoped she would return to China and find a stable job, But Nuanuan didn't want to give up and quickly decided to start a second business. During the day, Nuanuan had to meet clients and visit factories, while in the evenings she attended Thai language classes, sleeping only 3 to 4 hours each night. Before long, her import-export company was operating efficiently. Over the next 2 years, she successively opened a guest house and a Chinese restaurant, working from morning until night, constantly busy. However, her hard work earned her worthy rewards. Years of battling in the business world had made Nuanuan well known in the Thai-Chinese community, allowing her to accumulate significant assets and purchase multiple properties in Bangkok and Nanjing. In 2017, when Nuanuan turned 30, her family began to worry and urged her to get married soon. Although before coming to Thailand, Nuanuan had dated 2 boyfriends. Both relationships didn't last because she focused on her career. Seeing that her business was now flourishing, Nuanuan began to consider marriage. She asked friends to introduce potential partners, and people would joke, "You're so beautiful and capable, you don't need our introductions." Afterward, Nuanuan frequently attended social gatherings among friends. At one event, a young man sitting next to her initiated a conversation. The man said his name was Xiaodong, that he was from the same hometown as Nuanuan, and had come to Thailand specifically to rest and conveniently survey local business opportunities. At their first meeting, his Nanjing accent made Nuanuan feel close to home. They immediately exchanged contact information. From then on, Xiaodong quickly approached and frequently chatted with Nuanuan, showing attentive care for her. Every morning, Xiaodong would buy the fried dough sticks and soy milk that Nuanuan loved to eat. After her Thai language class each evening, he would always take the initiative to pick her up and drive her home. And each time he drove her home, Xiaodong didn't make any unreasonable demands, only telling her to rest early, clearly becoming the perfect suitor. Gradually, this man's attentive gestures and sweet words worked their way into Nuanuan's heart. She began to feel attracted and felt that finally, after all her efforts and waiting, she had found her dream prince. One morning, as she opened her door, Nuanuan was surprised to find Xiaodong standing outside with eyes darkened from lack of sleep. When she asked about the reason in surprise, Xiaodong sincerely confessed that he missed her too much, but didn't want to disturb the sleep of the woman he loved, so he resigned himself to standing outside all night. That moment touched the depths of Nuanuan's emotions. If before she had only normal, favorable feelings toward him, now her heart completely belonged to this man, whom she trusted would be a solid support for the rest of her life. After 2 weeks of dating, Xiaodong wrote a love letter specifically for Nuanuan. The letter was full of love, hoping to stay by her side for life. Next, he invited Nuanuan to go horseback riding on the beach, specially choosing 2 beautiful white horses. As they sat on the beach watching the sunset, Xiaodong gently said, "Nuanuan, stay with me. If you agree, I will be your white horse prince for life." Such a scene deeply moved Nuanuan, who had struggled abroad for many years, and they officially established their relationship. After being together, Xiaodong was very diligent and took good care of Nuanuan. When Nuanuan was under great work pressure, Xiaodong was always by her side to comfort and encourage her. After 20 days of dating, Xiaodong proposed to Nuanuan for the first time, but she felt it was still too sudden, and thought they should get to know each other for a longer period. Xiaodong grew impatient, saying this was a destiny arranged by heaven, that they shouldn't follow old-fashioned customs, and began to manipulate her. Eventually, Nuanuan couldn't resist his sweet talk and agreed to Xiaodong's proposal. After getting Nuanuan's consent, everything became easier. In July 2017, Xiaodong bought plane tickets back to China on his own, saying he wanted to meet his future in-laws. On the Monday morning after returning to China, Xiaodong appeared at Nuanuan's door, saying he didn't want to be apart for even a second, and asked her to bring out her household registration book to register their marriage. Even the love-struck Nuanuan felt this wasn't right. After all, her parents still didn't know about their relationship, and rushing into marriage like this was too irresponsible. Xiaodong said marriage was a matter between 2 people. As long as it was voluntary, nothing was impossible. Moreover, they could register first, then tell her parents, who would surely support them. Seeing that Nuanuan was still unwilling, Xiaodong then said tomorrow was July 15th, a Saturday. and according to normal regulations, the Civil Affairs Bureau would be closed. "Let's try our luck," he said. "If it's open, then it's heaven's arrangement, and we're definitely meant to be a family." Nuanuan agreed. Early the next morning, they held hands as they went to the Civil Affairs Bureau and were surprised to find it really was open. Nuanuan felt perhaps this truly was heaven's arrangement. The two took photos and registered their marriage. Thus, from May 19th, 2017, when they first met, to July 15th, when they officially registered their marriage, they had spent less than 2 months together. Nuanuan happily dreamed of the bright future awaiting ahead, but on Xiaodong's side there was a complete and dizzying change. The once diligent, attentive man seemed to transform into someone completely different. No longer hardworking, not going to work, spending all day glued to his phone playing games, indifferent to all of Nuanuan's needs. This indifference was clearly demonstrated through a sad incident. Once, when Nuanuan was helping at the Chinese restaurant, she accidentally slipped and fell down the stairs, unable to get up by herself. Xiaodong, who was sitting nearby, coldly looked up at his wife and then continued to be absorbed in his phone game. Finally, it took the restaurant staff to help her up and take her to the hospital for care. But an even bigger shock was waiting ahead. One evening, Xiaodong suddenly confessed that he had previously made careless friendships in China, was tempted into gambling, and as a result, fell into a trap, losing a huge sum of money, 1 million yuan, about $150,000. Now, creditors were hunting him down to collect the debt, and he was completely helpless, with no choice but to beg his wife for help. Although stunned, Nuanuan still placed complete trust in her husband. Instead of blaming him, she proposed a constructive solution. She would first help pay 500,000 yuan, $75,000, and for the remaining half of the debt, she hoped he would make his own efforts to earn it back. Xiaodong appeared remorseful, admitting he had been momentarily confused, and promised that in the future he would work diligently to rebuild his life. To help her husband regain confidence, Nuanuan introduced her connections and resources to Xiaodong, even giving him full authority to manage a company registered in her name. After some time, Xiaodong really did change, becoming more positive, going to work on time every day. Nuanuan saw this and was very happy, feeling that it wasn't easy for a couple to come together, so they should support each other and overcome difficulties together. She believed her husband could certainly turn his life around, and this failure could become a turning point in his life. Unfortunately, that beautiful period didn't last long. One morning, Xiaodong informed his wife that he was going to meet an important client, then disappeared without a trace, becoming unreachable. Initially, Nuanuan worried that her husband might have encountered trouble. She repeatedly called but received no response. The truth was only revealed when the company accountant suddenly called with a suspicious voice, asking if she was making a transfer to some supplier. It turned out that a huge expenditure of 5 million yuan, $750,000, had been transferred from the company account without any notes or documentation. Feeling uneasy, Nuanuan hurried to the bank to check and verify. There, the painful truth was exposed. Xiaodong had taken both their ID cards and marriage certificate, gone straight to the transaction counter, and carried out the transfer of this huge sum, a betrayal that had been carefully planned. Only then did Nuanuan realize she had been cruelly deceived by the very man she had trusted with her life. Nuanuan had mixed emotions, many feelings intertwined, but most of all was disappointment in her husband Xiaodong. After thinking it through, she decided to report to the police. 7 days later, the police finally found Xiaodong living in poverty. He knelt before Nuanuan, confessing about his unfortunate past. Xiaodong said that when he was young, he was influenced and went down the wrong path, having been sentenced to 12 years in prison for theft and robbery. When he met Nuanuan, he had only been out of prison for 3 years. During his 8 years in prison, he had endured many hardships. This time, when he went to the bank to withdraw money, he initially intended to invest it, but couldn't resist the temptation, thinking gambling would earn money faster. In reality, he didn't want to make efforts anymore, thinking life should be more comfortable, not wanting to put too much pressure on himself. But contrary to his wishes, Xiaodong lost all the money. He knelt on the ground crying, saying this time he would definitely reform. Nuanuan looked at her pitiful husband and once again softened. The two embraced in tears. Nuanuan still naively thought that after these trials and difficulties, her husband would change and become more responsible. But before long, everything returned to the familiar cycle. Xiaodong continued to be lazy, refusing to contribute to household work, causing the couple to frequently engage in intense arguments, pushing their marital relationship to a freezing point. The turning point came on April 1st, 2019, when Nuanuan discovered she was pregnant. What should have been a happy moment for both, instead met with extremely cold and cruelly indifferent attitude from Xiaodong. He even bitterly remarked, "Keep it if you want or don't, I don't care." Those heartless words deeply hurt Nuanuan, making her begin to seriously reconsider the future of this marriage. But what completely confused her was that just a few days later, Xiaodong suddenly changed completely, as if he were a different person. He suddenly became diligent, proactively doing housework each day, going to the market to cook, treating Nuanuan with extremely gentle and attentive attitude, as if they were returning to their sweet courtship period. Nuanuan, still naive and trusting, thought that the good news about the child had perhaps helped her husband mature, realizing the responsibility of a soon-to-be father. Just a few days later, Xiaodong proposed purchasing personal accident insurance for Nuanuan, with the notable detail that the beneficiary was none other than himself. Next, he sweetly suggested that, since Nuanuan was in the early stages of pregnancy, the couple should travel together to relax and bond. Without any suspicion, Nuanuan happily agreed, not knowing that this trip would be a deadly trap waiting ahead. On June 7, 2019, the couple set off, driving to tour various places, and arrived at Padang National Park in Prachuap Khiri Khan province. Throughout the trip, Xiaodong began to exhibit strange, unusual behaviors. Whenever they visited crowded attractions with many tourists, he appeared restless, impatient, and wanted to leave immediately. Conversely, at secluded locations with few passers-by, he would linger for a long time, walking back and forth, carefully looking around as if searching for something. Nuanuan didn't pay much attention to these unusual signs. She simply thought perhaps her husband preferred quiet atmospheres, enjoying nature more than crowded places. When they came to a treacherous cliff, Xiaodong suddenly became extremely excited. He walked around the area, his eyes lighting up, lingering and looking around, reluctant to leave, as if he had found something important. According to the original plan, on June 9th, they would continue their journey to Chiang Mai. However, on the evening of June 8th, Xiaodong suddenly proposed, "Tomorrow morning, let's go back to the Padang Cliff one more time." Nuanuan asked in surprise, "Haven't we already been there?" Xiaodong replied with a sweet, persuasive tone, "I heard the sunrise there is especially beautiful. If the three of us go together, we'll receive protection and blessing from the mountain spirit." Convinced by this seemingly romantic suggestion, Nuanuan happily agreed without suspecting the true intention behind the proposal. The two woke up at 3:30 a.m. and journeyed to the Padang Cliff 2 hours later. Due to unfavorable weather, the area was empty of tourists. After the sun rose at 7 a.m., the few remaining visitors gradually left, leaving the space completely silent with only Nuanuan and Xiaodong. Feeling they had seen enough scenery, Nuanuan gently suggested, "Let's go back too." Xiaodong didn't respond immediately. Instead, he slowly stood up and unexpectedly asked a question full of hidden meaning. "Is there anything you regret in this life?" Nuanuan, with a heart full of happiness, thought about her life, a complete family, successful career, and now carrying a small life inside her. She smiled happily and replied, "No," not knowing that would be the last affirmation of her life. The two held hands as they slowly walked back. Suddenly, Xiaodong said in a mysterious tone, "Nuanuan, there's a cave painting from ancient people 3,000 years ago at the front of the cliff. It's a famous photo spot here." Trusting her husband's words, Nuanuan naively followed. When she realized the path was becoming increasingly narrow and dangerous, a feeling of fear began to rise within her. Nuanuan frantically called to Xiaodong, begging him not to get any closer because it was too dangerous. But Xiaodong seemed not to hear his wife's call or deliberately ignored it. He continued straight to the cliff edge, then bent down, leaning close to the edge, his eyes constantly looking down at the terrifying depth below. Nuanuan felt extreme unease in her heart. She suddenly remembered that her husband had once said he was afraid of heights. Why was he so unusual today? But before she could scream, Xiaodong seemed to return to normal, coming back to Nuanuan's side, embracing her with both arms, speaking sweet words while leading his wife close to the cliff, and finally kissing her on the cheek. Just as Nuanuan was immersed in the romantic emotion, unable to escape, she heard the cruel words in her ear. Die! The Padang cliff has a height differential of several dozen meters, and the area at the bottom of the cliff was outside the park's management area. Once falling off the cliff, the chance of survival was extremely rare. But coincidentally, where Nuanuan was pushed off the cliff, which was about 112 feet high, at a distance of about 33 feet from the bottom of the cliff, there was a rock crevice with a tree trunk growing out of it, which absorbed most of the impact force of the fall. But even so, Nuanuan still hit the ground hard, breaking many bones and losing consciousness. It wasn't until an hour later that she gradually regained consciousness, trying to call for help, but by then her position where she had fallen was on a slope, head down and feet up, with blood constantly flowing into her throat, so she quickly could no longer call out. Nuanuan heard the sound of wind at the bottom of the cliff and the roar of wild animals in the mountains, feeling utterly desperate. If she waited until dark, what awaited her would only be death. However, at this moment, a vague footstep gradually approached. When Nuanuan thought it was a hallucination, her hand was grasped by someone, gently saying, "You're safe now." Later, she recalled, this person was like an angel, descending from heaven to save her. Because if it had been 10 minutes later, perhaps she could not have been rescued. However, the identity of this mysterious tourist remains undisclosed to this day. And how did he happen to appear at just the right time to rescue her at the bottom of a cliff, where no one had passed by for many years? Moreover, later when park staff checked the surveillance cameras, they found no trace of this kind tourist. After the case was made public, Nuanuan even contacted local media to search for this life-saving benefactor, but still without result. In fact, after pushing his wife off the cliff, Xiaodong did not leave, but stood at the cliff edge observing for more than 40 minutes. Only after ensuring no one had discovered anything did he drive away. Right on the way down the mountain, he saw an ambulance coming, instinctively thinking it might be coming to rescue someone, and quietly followed. At the hospital, staff verified Xiaodong's identity and brought him into the emergency room. At this point, Xiaodong began his performance, crying and saying, "Wife, where have you been? I've been looking for you for so long. How did you end up like this?" Nuanuan emotionally shouted, "Why did you treat me like this?" Xiaodong pretended to be calm, took a quick step forward, leaned close to Nuanuan and whispered, "Shut up and behave. No one here understands Chinese. There are only surveillance cameras but no witnesses. The police will only ask simple questions. If you dare to speak nonsense, I will definitely not spare you." Nuanuan was frightened. She knew the man before her was no longer her husband, but a devil in human disguise. To survive, she was forced to choose silence. After surgery, Nuanuan was transferred to the ICU. There was a camera in the room, one person per room, and Xiaodong monitored her 24/7 without leaving. Fearing the long night full of dreams, the next day Xiaodong demanded immediate discharge. When refused by the doctor, he became angry, pulling out Nuanuan's vital sign monitoring equipment and oxygen mask, pushing the hospital bed outside. Fortunately, hospital staff stopped him in time. Seeing his unusual behavior, the hospital reported to the police. On the third day, the police came to take statements, with Xiaodong always by her side, closely monitoring. In this situation, Nuanuan could only say she accidentally fell off the cliff and told Xiaodong she wouldn't speak nonsense, begging to call a friend to come help with care. Xiaodong agreed. On the fourth day, this friend arrived in Thailand and secretly recorded many private conversations between Nuanuan and Xiaodong, becoming important evidence in court later. On the fifth day, while Xiaodong was out buying breakfast, Nuanuan told the truth to the doctor. The attending physician understood, and that same day transferred her to a public ward where multiple patients stayed together and visiting time was limited to 15 minutes. This way, she escaped Xiaodong's control. On the sixth day, police took advantage of the time outside visiting hours, dressed in plain clothes, entered the ward, took a new detailed statement, and immediately applied for an arrest warrant. Early on the seventh morning, as soon as Xiaodong stepped into the ward, he was officially arrested by police. The hungry wolf in human disguise was finally caught. Until this moment, Nuanuan had not completely escaped danger. On March 24, 2020, defendant Xiaodong was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. He refused to plead guilty and declared he would appeal in court. But unexpectedly, in May 2021, the appeal court reversed the previous verdict, stating that no rope, knife, or other weapons were found at the crime scene, so it did not constitute attempted murder, and reduced Xiaodong's sentence to 10 years in prison. Upon hearing the news, Nuanuan was furious and decided to continue appealing. Since her near-death experience, she has undergone many surgeries, and the fetus in her womb could not be saved. Due to the side effects of using many medications, Nuanuan's body also suffered irreversible damage. However, she did not give up on herself. Just like before when going through failure, she still actively faced life, engaging in various rehabilitation exercises. Currently, she courageously appears on online platforms, telling her story, warning others, and through this has successfully transitioned to becoming a media blogger, attracting millions of followers. After 4 years of continuous effort, on June 2, 2023, the verdict of the third trial for this case was finally delivered. Xiaodong was found guilty of attempted murder, sentenced to 33 years and 4 months in prison. On June 26, Nuanuan posted on social media expressing satisfaction with the verdict result and stating that next she would proceed with civil litigation, hoping to soon end this marriage and begin a new life. 2 cases, one in Canada, one in Thailand, though geographically distant, bear frighteningly similar contours. 2 men turned love into a weapon, marriage into a trap, and the women who trusted them into victims of meticulously planned cruel conspiracies. These 2 cases also remind us that the boundary between love and hate, between peace and violence, is sometimes as thin as a thread. And in this increasingly connected world, such heartbreaking stories need to be told to warn and protect those who might become the next victims. And those are the 2 cases for today. What do you think about these 2 cases? Share in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss other intense cases. Thank you for watching and see you in other videos.